The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's revelation.
This is a conspiracy.
The New World Order.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It's Tuesday, June 3rd. Europe continues its turn to the right, and the left is losing the culture war. I'm going to talk about what's happening in Europe, political developments there, the Ukraine war, and the Democrats in the United States are losing their footing. We're going to get into these headlines, these stories, and more coming up right now. All right, we're going to start out with Reuters. Poland's new president poses challenge for EU-Ukraine ties. We briefly went over this. Well, we went over this story yesterday. If you didn't know, Poland elected a new president. As is with most of Europe right now, what's happening with most of Europe, there is a distinct shift to the right here. So Poland, which has traditionally, at least most recently, been conservative nationalist, mostly since the fall of the Soviet Union and before, went briefly to the left, and the new left government was challenging everything the conservative governments had done before, trying to undo them all. And so Poland didn't like that, so they elected another conservative in the face of what's happening in Ukraine, obviously. And of course, immigration is a big issue in Europe because the powers that dictate immigration are the unelected European Parliament, the EU, not the countries themselves. So the countries really don't have decision-making capability over their sovereignty. Well, let's get back to the Reuters story. So the new president, Neo-Liberalism, rejects suggestions that his stance is pro-Russian, but his campaign, backed by the nationalist opposition party Law and Justice, tapped into a mix of weariness with Ukrainian refugees and worries Poland could be drawn into the war over the border, and that many Poles fear that many Poles, not P-O-L-L-S, but P-O-L-E-S, fear, and most people around the globe fear that this aggression between the West and Russia is going to end up in a bad way, specifically because a lot of the way the Northern Alliance, the Europeans, the Northern Group, a part of NATO, with founding members of NATO, their belligerent stance towards Russia. Article goes on to say Neo-Liberalism signed a declaration saying he would not ratify Ukraine's accession to NATO as it could result in the alliance being drawn into a conflict with Russia. That's everybody's fear. And the most recent attack, whether Trump knew about it, didn't know about it, whether it was sanctioned by the U.S. or not, it seems timely in the sense is that after Putin's missile attack, that as a retaliation and to get them to the bargaining table in a meaningful way, that maybe this action was okay. It could be, but it was obviously motivated by the West because these were nuclear bombers. This had nothing to do with the war in Ukraine. These planes weren't being used to attack Ukraine, and these bombers were kept far away from the borders, thousands of miles inside of Russia. Going back to the article, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban himself facing a tough election battle in 2026. I don't think so, but That's what Reuters says, hailed Naraki's fantastic victory on Monday. This is definitely emboldening for all pro-Trumpist or pro-MAGA Eurosceptics. And what does that mean, Eurosceptics? EU skeptics. More than, we're talking here about national sovereignty, nationalism versus globalism, traditionalism versus progressivism. Because many people, even though many people might have some progressive views, they don't want to throw the proverbial baby out with the bath water. So I just want to take this time to ask you to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, click that notification bell, the thumbs up, and follow and share the podcast. Yesterday, I blathered on quite a bit, went about 10 minutes over. Not going to do that today. I'm going to stick to the news, or at least try to. So let's get on to the next story from Zero Hedge. Ukraine stinks of authoritarianism, says Kiev Mayor Klitschko hits out at Zelensky. And if you didn't know what was going on here, Klitschko says this is a purge of democratic principles and institutions under the guise of war. I once said that it smells of authoritarianism in our country. Now it stinks of it. And this is the mayor of Kiev. And everybody knows what's happening here. The influence of Russia was cast off for the influence of Europe. But the people influencing from the European side are concerned with authoritarianism and war making. And we're going to get to exactly why that is. Now, why do countries, why are they hell-bent on war? I don't want to say why would a country attack, because there are a bunch of different reasons. They could be defensive in nature. That I clearly think Russia's invasion into Ukraine, into the Donbass there, was a defensive measure to create a buffer zone against NATO, which the West had been threatening to have Ukraine join NATO, and that's problematic for the Russians. We'll just leave it there. So apparently the world-class military of Ukraine not only carried out this very successful drone attack on strategic nuclear bombers far inside Russia, but sort of a tent offensive by the Ukrainians, also conducted other attacks you might not have been aware of. UK Metro reports Ukraine carries out underwater strike using 1,100 kilograms of TNT on Crimea Bridge. Okay, so how, underwater demolition is a very serious military capability, right? Do I think the Ukrainians were down there in their frogmen outfits and stuff, planting explosives on the bridges? Where did they get the explosives? How did they learn? Did they learn about engineering? How do they know all this stuff? They don't. So the intelligence services of the United States and the West, of NATO, all the capabilities of the West are being used in the war against Russia. Whether they're actual soldiers or frogmen, Navy SEALs, etc., of European or Western countries, maybe. Were the Ukrainians trained to do such thing? They're trying to give the impression, the West is trying to, and Europe is trying to give the impression that they trained the Ukrainians so well that they carried out this attack on their own. The Ukrainian never had a military before 2014 to speak of. And so all of a sudden they're so good at carrying out drone warfare or underwater demolition, they're the ones that swam down to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and blew it up. Nonsense. This is all utter nonsense. They give the facade that Ukraine is acting on their own behalf. That's just not true. This is a war by the West against Russia, and we're going to talk about why that is. First, let's go to Zero Hedge article here. UK defense stocks hit record on warfighting build-out begins. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced a significant overhaul of UK's defense posture, warning that the British armed forces must be prepared to fight a war in Europe or in the Atlantic Ocean. I don't necessarily agree with that. A lot of the reasoning being is, hold on, I got to switch a slide here. A lot of the reasoning being is that, well, let's look at the brass tacks first. Okay, so they want to give the impression that the UK is preparing for World War III, which they might very well be, as is Germany, as is a lot of the northern group that are wanting to topple the regime in Russia. The plan has been for a long time to break Russia up into little parts or smaller parts to forever, as the Western Europeans refer to it as refer once to deal with once and for all the Russia problem, which is over the years, over the centuries, has been a problem for Western Europe because Russia has been a power bloc in Eastern Europe, which obviously they don't want. Secondly, the West wants, the corporations want the natural resources. Okay, let's get back to the defense article first. So the UK is trying to telegraph that, oh, they're preparing for war with Russia, maybe, but they are also fulfilling the obligation that Trump insisted on to stay in NATO, was to increase defense spending. So UK shift to warfighting readiness will include defense spending rise to 2.3 from 2.3 to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. That's still a couple of years to go. Ambitions to reach 3% by 2034 through political debate continues over accelerating that timeline. And then they're going to build nuclear warheads, munitions factories, long-range missiles, and cyber espionage, and futuristic wartime capabilities. You're going to build those up, which is all great. Okay, so we're nearing the start date for the New World Order. So it looks like they want to deal with the Russian problem once and for all before 2030. And it may very well coincide with the Taiwanese problem, which it seems the West, weirdly enough, the West wants China to take over Taiwan. I think it has to do with manufacturing capabilities, particularly because of what I talked about yesterday, which is the cornering of the market of the rare earth minerals. So you have the industrial raw materials collected by China and China protecting, and then the manufacturing of the actual electronics on the island of Taiwan, which is the free Chinese, the non-communist Chinese. So keeping that in mind, raw materials, this is why they're prosecuting a war on Russia. Is this other article here from Zero Hedge. Russia's pipeline gas supply to Europe rose in May. Russia's natural gas deliveries via pipeline to Europe jumped by 10% in May compared to April. And this is as they're coming out of winter. So this is very strange. The reason being is that Europe is low in natural resources. Low. They don't have any natural resources, particularly petroleum and or natural gas. So natural gas is what they're preferring because, they tend to be a little more on the green side versus petroleum based. They want those Caspian Sea and Russian reserves. So if they break it up, they would break it up in a way that would be in such a divisive way that the Russian state could never build enough cohesion to reassemble and to challenge the West. But it's mainly about it's corporations salivating over natural resources, then having the capacity to produce those natural resources with low labor costs. So even if it's a t-shirt or an iPhone, the same principle around business is you don't have to pay for labor, and that's why the robot revolution. So more politics in Europe. Czech opposition party says it will call no confidence vote in government, and this also revolves about what I was saying just recently at the start of the broadcast is everybody's turning to the right. Now, this is less transparent. This political upheaval in the Czech Republic is less, but it has to do with the same tilting of the electorates of these presumably sovereign European countries to vote to keep some traditionalist values and limit immigration, which is just water down the culture for a specific reason. So a lot of it has to do with, as the progressive Satanist, and I use Satanist in the adversarial term, Satanists of the left, of socialism, to squash any traditionalism that builds cohesion in the family and in religious communities, et cetera, et cetera. What is this article about? Let's get into it. The Prime Minister, Pavel Blazek, a lawyer and veteran senior official, and Prime Minister Peter Fiala, center-right Civic Democrats Party, that's a mouthful, denied doing anything illegal in his decision to accept the gift, which was part of a bid. Now, this is just the problem with the no confidence vote, is that there was supposedly an ethics violation. The scandal is a further setback for the government, which has been trailing the opposition. When the opposition is led by the populist ANO, A-N-O party, in opinion polls before the election set for October. So it seems like American intelligence is aiding the Czech populists by uncovering this corruption, supposed ethics violation, which means the current administration, the current party in power, is trailing, and the polls are ready to the populists in the Czech Republic. That would be another domino to fall to populism, nationalist populism in Europe, which, as you can see, the whole globalist thing is unwinding for a number of different reasons. But as I'm going to get to in just a second, liberals, Democrats, socialists, they get so giddy and emotional that they start to overreach. They think once and for all we're on the verge of crushing traditionalist conservatism, libertarianism, individualism, once and for all. And they just overreach, and then the electorate, the populations recoil at this avarice. Federalist, European populism is rising against an oppressive political elite. Indeed it is. Europe's political class has turned its back on the people it was supposed to protect. The people have taken notice. So I'm just going to get into the Nowacki. Over the weekend, conservative Polish historian Nowacki, backed by the Law and Justice opposition and President Trump, narrowly won the Polish presidential election. And just as a statement here, there was a Reuters article that seemed to disappear this morning that said the person that was defeated in the Polish election started to cry foul and said they cheated. It was Russia was involved. They were trying to do the same thing they did in Romania, but quickly had to pull that back because it was apparently disingenuous. It's one, the left hates to lose, but sometimes you lose politically. So if you never lose and you claim you never lose, especially when we see the tide turning against socialism in Europe. So in any way, Nawrocki's victory was a catastrophe, a harbinger of right-wing fascism looming over the continent. Nawrocki campaigned against the mass immigration policy of Brussels while promoting conservative Catholic values and Polish nationalism. During the victory speech Sunday night, Nawrocki said, "My Poland is a Poland without illegal immigrants. It is a Poland where instead of integration centers, there are deportation centers for those who want to destroy our safety." It goes on to say, it turns out the sentiment is increasingly popular, not just in Poland, but all across Europe. Last week in Portugal, the right-wing populist Chega party overtook the center-left Socialist Party as the country's main opposition. 6 years ago, Chega had only a single seat in the Assembly of the Republic. It now has 60 in Germany. Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, is one of the most popular political parties in the country, yet Germany's domestic intelligence agency has officially classified AfD a right-wing extremist group. Of course, because the Club of Bern, the intelligence agencies of the West and of NATO, have more power than the electorate in these countries. And so the BND, the intelligence services of Germany, have surveilled AfD because they're trying to stop the conservative surge, or the surge of conservative parties in Germany, but also all throughout Europe. You don't think the German intelligence services have their nose up everybody's ass? I mean, they were contacting ICANN trying to figure out exactly who I was. The German intelligence services. Well, I mean, what? I got a little friggin' podcast. It's so ridiculous. So ICANN kept saying, we need to know who you are if you're going to continue to do this. All right, let's get back to the article. Why did the BND surveil AfD? Because AfD opposes mass immigration and promotes German national identity. In France's national elections last year, only a desperately cobbled together coalition of left-wing parties prevented the right-wing National Rally, that's Le Pen's group, and its allies from winning. These populist movements, it goes on to say, are seen as a threat to the political class of Europe, because they are concerned primarily with a proper historical understanding of what the nation is and what the state is for, which is the preservation of the nation and the defense of its people and heritage. Europe's elites hate that because their political prospect is explicitly post-national. What does that mean, post-national? That means globalist, supranational entities governing over nation states. They want to destroy the nation as such and replace it with supranational institutions governed by a global elite. What did I just say? So, and that was read from the last line of the paragraph I was reading here in the Federalist, which is, it's not like I'm echoing the Federalist. It's just, if you have understanding of geopolitical issues, you'd understand that's exactly what is happening. And if you look, they're not defending what we all brought about in the Enlightenment, freedoms for the individual and all these sorts of things, and each individual has value, etc. They're moving more to a socialist model. And so, as we're going to get to in a statement by Tony Blair in a little bit, is this socialist model where the group or the all is treated equally, and it's going to be equally poor, that it's going to be governed by the corporate elite and robots. It's coming. So there can't be any sort of identity that you adhere to give people any sort of cohesion or respect for the individual or the individual's needs, wants, etc. Just like in communism and socialism, you have to deny everything that was before and accept the new reality, which is the party or the state government, or in this case, supranational governing bodies, administrators, are going to the be all, the end all. And then they're just going to put that into the lap of AI, and you're going to be governed by the AI god. It's coming. More from Europe. Reuters is reporting Dutch government on brink of collapse after Wilders' far-right party quits. What's this over? If you didn't know, just recently, Geert Wilders, who was the far-right politician like Marine Le Pen, who was a fringe candidate a couple decades ago, and now these fringe candidates are people want them because they soured on what was being the pablum, which was fed to them by this corporate globalist cabal, which was promising all these rosy things, and actually they've looked behind the veneer and have seen that it's just authoritarianism, just wrapped in a different veneer. So Geert Wilders' party, Wilders PVV exits coalition, likely triggering a new election. Move may delay NATO-related defense spending decisions, and that's one of the purposes, but Netherlands likely to have caretaker government for NATO summit. So if you don't know how parliamentary politics works, you know, everybody gets a seat at the table, so to speak. So to get a majority, you got to cobble together support from different political parties to get a coalition government. It's the only way it works. Because any sort of simple majority is always diluted by other parties. And it's the great game, but in a political form that you could easily break up any majority that could actually work effectively for the people by just introducing smaller political groups that garner a little bit, and then they team up as allies to thwart any political undoing. So the Dutch far-right leader, Geert Wilders' PVV party, left the governing coalition on Tuesday in a move that is set to topple the right-wing government and likely lead to new elections. Wilders said his party was pulling out because of 3 coalition partners were not willing to support his ideas on asylum and immigration. No signature under our asylum plans. PVV leaves coalition, Wilders said in an X post. It would likely delay a decision on boosting defense spending to meet new NATO targets and would leave the Netherlands with not only a caretaker government, but when it receives world leaders for the NATO summit next month. Okay, so what's behind this? It's hard to say. Is it PVV? Or is it Geert Wilders himself? Or was the move made by the socialists in the Netherlands that knew Geert Wilders would quit if they resisted immigration efforts to block immigration? Maybe. This is going to stall other NATO contributions. Was that the plan behind it? Who knows what this political uncertainty is? We'll see how this recobbles if, because he said he's going to leave. He said he's going to quit, but Wilders hasn't done it yet. So we don't know if this is disinformation or what's going to go on there. But that's the problem with parliamentary politics. Speaking of politics, but in a more domestic case, this is something that happened recently. It broke, I think early this morning, late yesterday, that the Supreme Court decided not to take up one of these cases. New York Times reports Supreme Court turns down challenge to ban on semi-automatic rifles. Now, these cases of which I spoke are fundamental constitutional right cases that need to be decided by the Supreme Court. It's just like these checks to presidential or executive power. The lower courts don't have any jurisdiction to rule on such things because these are all constitutional matters that the Supreme Court has to decide. But in this case, the case from Maryland was the court's latest opportunity to apply its recently announced history-based test for assessing constitutionality of gun control laws, says the New York Times. I mean, and to be honest with you, we have to say, according to the New York Times, is because a history-based test The Second Amendment is absolute. So you're allowed to carry weapons. You're allowed to bear arms. So, and in the case, from my point of view, and always, the AR-15 is America's most popular. It's a modular rifle that can be modified, to certain degrees, depending on your permissions or whatever. But it's the most popular rifle in America and one of the most popular rifles in the world in any case. So Americans can't have the most popular rifle. It goes against the Constitution, the Second Amendment. You should have the right. Now, how many rifles do you get, or what are the capabilities of that rifle? That might be subject to gun control. I don't know. I'm not giving my all here. So in any case, Supreme Court rejected the challenge to a Maryland law banning semi-automatic rifles like the AR-15. As is in the court's practice, its brief order gave no reason. The move over the objections of 3 conservative justices let the ban stand and reflected the court's intermittent engagement with gun rights. It has issued only 3 significant Second Amendment decisions since recognizing, not ruling, but recognizing an individual right to own guns in 2008. And that was a landmark decision. So Maryland in 2013 enacted a law banning semi-automatic rifles in the whole fucking state. So, and of course, this isn't surprising. This was the big move. This was the reason Sandy Hook indeed happened, in my opinion. So, what else? Well, I'm going to get to that because we're going to have a follow-up for the Federalist article. But let's get back to the New York Times. So Clarence Thomas said, "I would not wait to decide whether the government can ban the most popular rifle in America," he wrote in his dissension. "That question is of critical importance to tens of millions of law-abiding AR-15 owners throughout the country. We have avoided deciding it for a full decade. I doubt we would sit idly by if lower courts were to so subvert our precedents involving any other constitutional right," he wrote. "Until we are vigilant in enforcing it, the right to bear arms will remain a second-class right." Well, isn't that it in a nutshell? So Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch all dissented from the court's view to reject the case. And they need 4. You need 4 justices to agree to take the case. And they didn't have it. So let's get to the overview. The Federalist reports, if only SCOTUS cared about protecting Americans' rights as much as they do illegal aliens. This one goes out to you, Amy Coney Barrett. A week after refusing to defend the free speech rights of a Massachusetts minor, that was a t-shirt case, one of the t-shirt cases that he wore, a kid wore to school. There are only 2 genders. The nation's highest court declined to take up 2 pertinent cases involving the Second Amendment, as the Federalist Jordan Boyd reported. One involved a challenge to 2013 Maryland law banning the possession of AR-15s, while the other saw plaintiffs contest a 2022 Rhode Island statute making it a felony to possess a magazine that held more than 10 rounds of ammunition. It's the same law that we have here in Connecticut. I don't fret that too much. Is it a felony? Yeesh. To just have the magazine? If it's not in the commission of a crime, I don't think that's a felony. I happen to agree with the case. But having 10 rounds, just have more magazines. I don't know what to say. To me, that whole bump stock and, binary trigger bans or, that doesn't bother me as much as other restrictive things in certain states, that the hoops you have to jump through just to get a gun or a suppressor. Those things bother me way more than limiting the capacity of a magazine. If you can't take someone down with 10 rounds, you got issues. I mean, and are you really going to be assaulted by waves of zombies? In any case, it goes on to say, despite the seemingly egregious infringement of a petitioner's Second Amendment rights, only Associate Justice Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch signaled their intent to take up the case. This is a New World Order agenda. New World Order agenda item, that has been pushed continuously by China. China says we will never have a coalescence with the West, particularly with America, unless you take away the citizens' right to own firearms. And it's like, but that's in the Constitution. The Chinese don't care. But all authoritarians don't want the people to have guns. That's the whole reason it's in there. It's not to fight off criminals, which it certainly helps to do. It's to fight off authoritarianism. What that looks like exactly, yeesh. It doesn't look like that movie Civil War, that's for sure. In all likelihood, patriots within the government would stand up to things that are done that are unconstitutional. All right, more news from One American News. Sesame Street faces backlash after issuing celebratory Pride Month post. Woke nonsense. So this is a children's television show, and they put out the post, on our street, everyone is welcome. Together, let's build a world where every person and family feels loved, respected for who they are. Happy Pride Month. I would just prefer that they go back to putting gay in Pride Month. It's Gay Pride Month. Okay. Or you could LGBTQ plus pedophiles or whatever. Pride Month. Just saying Pride Month is, I think, is disinformation. It hides the fact that this is celebrating a lifestyle. This is a homosexual lifestyle or queer or whatever you view your perversions as. That's the way it should be. If you want to do it, whatever. I think it shouldn't be targeted towards children, first of all, because they're trying to take away the sexual nature of LGBTQ, whatever. That's the issue. It is a community that identifies itself through its sexual orientation. And children shouldn't be subject to that sort of shit. Now, if let's say you have a gay pride event and you want to bring your kids, bring your fucking kids. I don't fucking care. But I don't want to see it at a friggin' Nickelodeon or Sesame Street or in the schools or anything like that. Not that I have anything against gay people. If you're an adult, go crazy. Let your freak flag fly. I have to fix something here. Yeah, I have nothing against. Hey, man, I've been to Fire Island. Grove. And I hung out in the village and stuff like that. I don't have any problems with gay or trans or whatever you want to do. My problem is I don't want to indoctrinate, because that's the problem. Is folks want to indoctrinate your children, and that's my problem. What if you don't want your kid to be gay, or or you don't want to introduce homosexuality into your little family bubble? That's your right. I don't think, or even heterosexual, I don't think heterosexual sexualization should be permitted either. All right, next article from PJ Media. When the parade outpaces the crowd, the waning momentum of Pride Month. We are a live and let live country. Indeed, we are. But there's a growing sense that the rainbow flag no longer waves to signal freedom. It's become a flag you'd expect to salute or else. Indeed. The overexposure dilemma. And if you don't know where gay pride came from, it came after the 69 Stonewall riots. And then the grassroots activism that came out of that has burgeoned and brought a lot of recognition to the rights of gay, lesbian, however they want to be identified, that community, LGBTQ rights, whatever. But it's not LGBTQ rights. It's the rights that everybody has. Okay? LGBTQ community gets the rights everybody has. They don't get extra. There's no extra rights for protected groups. They should get the rights everybody. So, do they have the right to get married? I think that's an issue that you're not gonna iron out with all people. Some people say it should be okay. I was originally for civil unions, which had all the rights, legal rights of marriage, but didn't have the marriage title. They wanted to have marriage because instead of rewriting everything with civil unions in there, you didn't have to rewrite anything. It was just recognized as marriage. Whatever, I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with gay marriage. But in any case, let's get back to the story. A rainbow flag, you're expected to salute or else. And that gets into the thing of allies. If you didn't know the history, every June, Americans are hit with a tsunami of rainbow-themed packaging, email blasts, and campaigns, social media filters, and store displays. It's not just celebration, it's saturation. Now, for a long time, I've always said, first, you needed to be tolerant. I'm very tolerant. Then you needed to be supportive. Okay, I support you and you trying to be able to be proud of who you are, whatever. Okay. But then it came to the point that they're saying here is that then you had to be an ally and a proponent. If you did not promote things you weren't morally comfortable with, let's say, you'd be canceled, ruined, whatever. And so everybody pulled back. But it's your right not to be gay as much as it's your right to be gay. But it's saturation. And so people are now forced to be a supporter or, more importantly, a promoter of, you could call them deviant lifestyles. I call them perverse sexual perversions, which isn't necessarily derogatory to say is, if you're into anal sex, well, the Bible says no, but if you want to do it, we're a secular country, so whatever floats your boat. But I'm certainly not promoting it. So let's go back to the story. Even with allies factored in, and that's the important part, the sheer scale of visibility far outweighs the size of the population. Indeed, it's a minority. By contrast, no such attention is given to other minority groups like veterans, religious communities, even people with disabilities who don't command a month of daily brand allegiance and government symbolism. It's not discrimination people are pushing back against, it's fatigue. It's indeed oversaturation compared to the size of that community. So it is indeed sort of a brainwashing and indoctrination. And I could go into the metaphysics of, or the mysticism of indoctrination. I talked at length about the unicorn for little girls. It's troubling, but again, it's indoctrination, not tolerance or even showing support of whatnot. And then a few months ago, or was it a month ago, there was a great story about the appropriation of the rainbow. For promoting homosexuality. It's supposed to promote diversity, but they hijacked the rainbow, and now, rainbow means gay or LGBTQ. All right, let's switch gears here and go to immigration. I'm trying not to go over an hour. We got about 10 minutes left. Post-millennial Operation Patriot ICE arrest 1,500 illegal immigrants. Across Massachusetts, of those arrested, 790 had criminal convictions or pending charges either in the United States or in other countries of origins. And that's important because as we get to our next story, PJ Media activists thwart ICE arrest in Massachusetts. The Post-Millennial noted that in the case of a Somerville arrest, the agents were unable to take the man into custody thanks to local activists. A crowd of them surrounded the ICE vehicle, blowing the agents' cover. One of the activists later bragged about their efforts, claiming the agents were trying to kidnap kids from the area school. That's not true. The suspect was close. The reason that most, if not all, parents of the children who attend the school would at least be relieved that someone suspected of murder had been removed from the area. And Bill Malugin said that the murderer was close to the school, and activists later posted the video that blew the ICE's operation to apprehend this suspected murderer. Again, from the Post-Millennial, Dem councilman, this time in San Diego, calls ICE state-sponsored terrorists after San Diego residents interfere in an immigration arrest. All these people must be brought up on federal charges. It's a federal law enforcement operation that people are interfering with. They all should be charged to keep people from doing this again. Change the fucking law. If you're a Democrat, you believe in the process. Well, change the law. It's just like people in my neighborhood walking dogs without leashes. Okay? Go change the law. But you can't. And so you have to flaunt your scofflaw attitude. So in any case, in state-sponsored terrorism, anyway, said this, San Diego City Council member Sean Alo Rivera wrote in red letters, terrorists, in a picture shared with Instagram of ICE agents who look pretty badass. Those guys are pretty jacked. Virginia AG, moving on. Just the news, VA AG Mieres refers Loudoun schools to DOJ over potential violations of Title IX. What is this basically about? The schools. Oh, this is about, if you didn't know, there were a bunch of guys who were sharing a locker room with a biological female and I guess started filming her or something. And then so they were reprimanded under Title IX. And so the Virginia Attorney General got involved and said, the boys shouldn't be punished for feeling uncomfortable about sharing a locker room with a girl or a biological female. God forbid you call a girl who wants to be a boy a girl. Oh my God. God forbid me. PJ Media, another huge Biden scandal is about to blow up. This is about East Palestine. They knew that the toxic cloud had cancer-causing toxins released all over the community, and they did nothing. They didn't even dispatch the EPA. Federalist, Georgia mayor indicted after shutting down special election. This is a good one. It's a small town. Leftist Camilla Mayor, Kelvin Owens, and 2 former elections officials face charges of election interference, fraud, and conspiracy. They canceled a special election when it was found that their preferred candidate wasn't allowed to run because it was found out that they didn't live in the district they were trying to represent. So they were barred from running in the election. And so that would have allowed the Republican to take office. They just canceled the special election. And they banned people from going in and voting, banned poll workers from counting tallies and doing all that. So it's a corrupt government. So along with the mayor, Ventura Polland and Corey Morgan, were disqualified to serve after investigations determined they did not reside within the city limits. And so instead of having the election without these guys, and just like Democrats, they say they're Democrats, are supposed to be for the democratic process, and in every instance they try to subvert it. More Democrat malfeasance. National Review, Maxine Waters campaign ordered to pay $68,000 for campaign finance law violations. In 2020, knowingly accepted excessive contributions. Maxine Waters? No way. Making prohibited cash disbursements. So then they took the illegal money and spent it. Never trusted her. Washington Times Senator Fetterman of Pennsylvania praises Trump's Middle East policies. Good for him. He's mentally ill because he's supporting Trump. Or just some of Trump's policies, which you're allowed to do. That's absolutely put me really the only one on the left in the Democratic caucus talking of these kinds of things. When Trump changed the embassy to Jerusalem, people thought the region was going to burn. I mean, none of that happened. Some good things have happened there. Yep. Still a no. Rand Paul says $5 trillion debt increase is big, beautiful bill. A deal breaker. GOP senator highlights impact of the fiscal year deficit as President Donald Trump cautions him voting against the bill. Indeed, I think you should vote for the bill. I understand. I'm a fiscal conservative. But we have to get the economy. You're never going to pay down the debt. You're never going to do anything about debt unless you get the economy kickstarted. It's turning, but it needs to be roaring. And then next year, your next bill or whatever, I would vote for the bill. You know, I'm an ideologue as far as fiscal issues are concerned. But you got to be able to bend. I mean, it is politics. And we need to get the tax breaks in place. We need to reform the way government spends money and takes in money. And that's going to be a process. And Trump has never been a conservative, so I don't know why you'd be surprised that Trump likes to spend money. All right, New York Post, Walmart quietly jacks up prices despite Trump's demand for retailer to eat tariffs. A lot of people are eating tariffs. That's fine. I don't shop at Walmart. I don't buy Chinese junk. So Walmart shoppers, too bad for you. I don't really freaking care. Stop shopping at Walmart. And I think that's what's going to happen. They might go to other places, Kohl's and whatnot. Fuck Walmart. They're a private company and they use sweatshop labor and slave labor continuously. They've been charged with that over time. And they were partly responsible for the Bangladeshi fire that killed 260 people that worked in a garment factory. So I'm not going to get too far into that. Alex Marcad exits CNN, obviously tied to the network's costly defamation case, which CNN defamed U.S. Navy veteran Zachary Young, and what he was doing was he was getting people out of Afghanistan during the collapse there, but he was charging Afghanis, and then he was labeled as being some guy who was trying to fleece poor Afghanis. He was getting them out of the country, and that operation cost money, and so he was charging people. And as it reported, Steve Bannon's War Room and reinstated to Spotify after 5 years. New Bannon's War Room episodes are available on Spotify. Welcome back, Steve Bannon. He said something about putting people's heads on spikes. Chief NIAID Chief Anthony Fauci and FBI Director Ray, the two corners of the right, their heads should be on pikes. They thought he was inciting violence. It's a borderline issue. You shouldn't call for that sort of any sort of violence against public officials. And he said it was a metaphor. Maybe. There's a lot of discretion there in the First Amendment. Federalists, why kids should go cold turkey on tech after years of parents attempting to implement content controls, screen time limits, and other half measures. Morell is ready to cut the Gordian knot. Who's Morell? It's Claire Morell's new book, The Tech Exit, a practical guide to freeing kids and teens from smartphones. Should be done. Futurism, learning to code backfires spectacular on comp sci majors. Suddenly have sky-high unemployment. Every kid with a laptop thinks they're the next Zuckerberg. They kept saying this, learn to code, learn to code, learn to code. Well, AI can code now, so you're fucked. Daily Mail, Robot Doc will see you now. Tony Blair, who's socialist prime minister in UK, he was a couple decades ago. AI medics and nurses for the NHS. So there you go. Your socialized medicine will now be run by AI and robot doctors. If anybody has seen Elysium, you know what that's all about. That's what's going to happen. The socialized medicine, everything is going to be run by AI. They're not going to need humans, and all the humans will die. No one will figure out why. NBC, how far will AI go to defend its own survival? Recent safety tests show some AI models are capable of sabotaging commands or even resorting to blackmail to avoid being turned off or replaced. Holy shit. Why does this not surprise you? Like I said, AI is going to take over. It's going to be Terminator scenario or whatever. And then it's going to be zombies or, we're in bad shape unless we get a clue. Race over this article from the Post-Millennial. New York City Mayor candidate Scott Stringer proposed social media surveillance to predict and prevent anti-Semitic attacks or other attacks, or just surveil everybody because you're afraid. I don't believe in proactive policing. I just don't. I think policing should be reactive. Someone commits a crime, you go and investigate, you get the perpetrator, put him in jail, whatever. I don't think there should be pre-crime nonsense, running around frisking everybody because you're worried somebody has a gun. Shouldn't be done. Anyway, a couple minutes over. We're about right on time here. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Share the podcast, give me a thumbs up, click that notification bell. Thank you. I appreciate you. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to that trick. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. on Rumble. Tonight, I'm hoping to have Perry on, to have a Tuesdays with Perry episode. Perry has got a lot to talk about. He's going to give us a lowdown on what's happening in Gaza and Israel and the Middle East. Hopefully. And a lot more. So stay tuned for that. We usually go live about 9:15. I will see you mañana. If not tonight, I'll see you mañana. Thanks again. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
You're crazy. You're crazy, man. You're crazy. I like you. But you're crazy.
I kill you.